Hey everyone, if you're looking for this week's Q&A, it's not going to come out until later. This video is a little bit different, so I decided to start a podcast called Unzipping Taboos, Candid Conversations about Sex. To introduce you folks to it, I've included the entire episode after this quick introduction. New episodes drop on Spotify every Wednesday morning. If you're interested, go check it out.
Hey everyone, welcome to our first episode of Unzipping Taboos, Candid Conversations about Sex with Dr. Sue and Charlie. Together, we're going to dive deep into the topics around sex and sexuality that you're curious about but maybe too shy to talk about. No judgment here, real talk. So zip down and let's get candid. Hey Dr. Sue.
Hey, Charlie.
How's it going?
It's going well. I'm so excited to be doing the pilot. And I think it's important that we say again, because this is not our first attempt at the pilot.
Why do we have to share that?
Because the whole thing's about being candid.
And transparent, yes.
Yes. So yes, I'm very excited to redo this and get it out to people. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I am also excited about this, about our episode and what we're going to focus on today. So before we get into that, or if we want to share right now, do you want to give a little bit about your background?
Yeah. I'll be doing this in each of the episodes just for people who kind of don't find us with episode 1. I'm actually going to do a little bit deeper dive on my background for this first episode because I think it's a little bit important. So I have a bachelor's and master's degree in health education. So I come from a health background. And then I decided to really focus in for my PhD. And I have a PhD in human sexuality education. I have been working in academia for a long time. But in addition to my work in academia, I've also always worked kind of outside of academia. I think it's really important that folks are working in the real world, not just in that ivory tower. So I've worked in reproductive health clinics. I have written textbooks. I have a few years ago I started really wanting to reach more humans than I could get in my classroom. So a few years ago I started doing Hey Dr. Sue, which is where people submit an anonymous sex questions to me, and then every Sunday I answer them, and it's posted on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and X, and we have a link to that in the show description. So this is just part of kind of the journey for me, was to start from a real place of like learning and knowledge for me, and then start sharing it out with students, and now sharing it out with everyone who's listening. And so that's I guess that wasn't as long as I thought it was going to be. This other person joining me today and on all episodes is Charlie. Charlie is going to be our open-minded guide through the intimate and intriguing world of sex, relationships, and basically everything in between. So tell us a little bit about you, Charlie.
Well, Dr. Sue and I have been friends for many years, and by virtue of our background, it sparked many a candid conversation together just between us. And as you were exploring this space and continuing your education space with your students, it kind of came up like, where else are we going to get this information if we're not in a classroom? And I think they shared with you where they saw this information before they got in your class. So there's that. I am someone that really enjoys challenging taboos and social norms, and bringing to the forefront like why aren't we talking about this? There's really nothing scary about it. It's something that many of us do.
Sorry,
there can be things scary about it, but is that really because it is taboo that we have been conditioned to the taboo nature of this subject and our interactions with it, and all of the different ways we are socially conditioned to think about sex and sexuality and relationships and sexual health. So throughout our conversations and the candid nature of them, and our friendship, we thought, hey, why not do this together and bring it to as many people as we can through this medium. And I think it really makes it it helps make it equitable. Access to the information makes it equitable, right? Because it's not only existing in a classroom now.
Yeah, and I think that was a really big push for me when I started doing the online work, was that I realized that the only people who are getting the information from me, and not that I'm the only sex educator that's out there, but people were only getting the information from me if they happen to be lucky enough to be sitting in my classroom or at a live event, because I do events out in the community. If they weren't in those spaces and they weren't getting information from me, and again, I'm not the only source out there, but a lot of this I'm actually going to blame on my students, because I would have these conversations semester after semester, and they would just come to me with these ideas, and I'm like, where are you getting this from? And they were getting it from social media and podcasts and things like that, and some of the information was great and some of it not so much. And so I would critique some of what they were hearing, and they're like, well, why aren't you out there? You know, if you have so much to say, where's your podcast? So here it is, to answer all that questions over the years.
Here we are.
Yeah, but they had a great point, and I know that in the Q&A that I've still been doing, I still have students from years ago reaching out to me and saying, hey, like, I have a question now, and you know, being able to access a source of information and hopefully be entertained a little bit it is helpful, and I think it's something that we need. So we're gonna throw our hats in the ring of people who are kind of doing this.
Of the podcast world. I think another thing too, an important thing to point out here is, you know, we've mentioned your students and your experience with your students, and there's an implication there of a certain demographic. And that's not really what we're aimed at. We are aimed at the spectrum of humans, humanity, and ages, because everybody, it's rare that there are people who aren't curious about how to talk about this on whatever level they are either interested or engaging with sex and sexual health.
Yeah.
Right? It is not just college students. It is everybody, because this impacts everybody.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I used to live in the Washington, D.C. area, and when I was there, I was doing a lot of work with seniors and healthcare workers who worked with seniors, and really I did a lot of work across the lifespan. And I know you and I have had this conversation about the fact that older folks are very stereotyped about not being sexually active, and how do we challenge that, and how do we get them information, because they may not know where to get that either. So yeah, this is really open to anyone who can listen to the podcast. I don't know, since we've been marked as sexually explicit content, I don't know if that limits who can access it. One of the things I want to point out, that there is a link in the description if you would like to submit either a question you want us to answer, or you want to submit a show idea, because we really want this to be about what you folks want to hear. I can talk for hours about topics that may not be of interest to everyone, and so we really do want to make this a show for you folks who are listening.
Yeah, and to that end, I don't want our listeners to feel like it has to be some kind of educational, this is the specific topic. If you're watching TV or you're listening to something and there is a nugget that you heard that made you think about it in a way that's like, I want to unpack this, we're open. That's the stuff that we also want to engage with as well, because so much of, in my opinion, our attitudes towards sex, sexual health, and conversations surrounding sex and intimacy are so socially conditioned through the ways that we consume information. And given the technology advances and the additional channels of information that we all have access to, that has really broadened the scope of, okay, where is the essence of what I need to engage with?
Yeah. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, about kind of what makes this hard to talk about and why we need to have this podcast. I do want to come back to our title just for a hot second. So it is Unzipping Taboos. We've definitely talked about that. These are candid conversations, and so these episodes are not edited. I mean, they may be edited a wee bit if something funky happens, but they're candid conversations, because conversations about sex can be super awkward, and you're going to probably fumble for words, and you're going to laugh at what may seem really inappropriate moments, and so you're going to hear us misspeak. You There's going to be things like that happen, but we want to remind you that some of this can be difficult to talk about, especially if you've never done it before. And so we're trying to model how to get through what could be a very weird thing to have an open conversation about.
And I think that is important to highlight because it can be very awkward to talk about if you're not used to it. But this candid conversation format also highlights it can be awkward even if you are used to talking about it.
I have literally stood on stage and spoken to hundreds of people at live events, and I still trip up. I've been doing this for literally decades. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. There is no perfection here. So, and we're humans. We're going to screw it up. And I tell my students that all the time. They joke with me. They get to about midpoint in the semester and they realize that my answer to everything is communication. And they joke. They do. It becomes a running joke. But I tell them, like, you're human. You're gonna screw this up. You're carrying all the baggage into the conversation with you. Mm-hmm. So don't expect it to be perfect. And Absolutely. I know that. Yeah, I know some of my students when they're trying to talk to partners or potential partners, and especially if they're doing it by text. And I have feelings about text. I'm actually
That's probably a future episode.
Yes, so I'm not against it, just for the record.
Yeah.
But they'll spend hours like crafting the perfect message. You're running it by friends and screenshotting it. And what do you think? And I think we need to realize that we're never going to do this perfectly, and we are going to screw up. And I think we want to give you permission to do it because we're going to do it ourselves that way.
Absolutely. So that brings us to the whole premise of this, the unzipping the taboo. And we wanted to highlight in this episode, not just us and why we thought this podcast was necessary, but what are some of the contributing factors that make this difficult to talk about or have people shying away from having conversation, just why is this so taboo, Dr. Sue?
Because we don't ever give it that space. We don't, for a lot of us, we never learned about it in school, and I desperately want to do an episode on the state of sex education in the United States in the future, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. But we never learned the language. I've worked with adults who have never said the word penis out loud. They don't know their own body parts. Like, I spend a lot of time talking to folks about the difference between a vagina and a vulva. So there's this fear that they don't know what they're talking about because they've never been taught how to talk about. So there's just a lack of language, there's a lack of training, and then there's all this other stuff that people bring in. Culture 100% has an impact on that. The families we were raised in, what we saw as appropriate in media around us. And I know that watching the next generation come up, they're seeing things very differently than I did. I mean, social media didn't exist when I was a child. And when there was something on the TV my parents didn't think was appropriate, I was asked to leave the room. And now they're getting messages from media, they're getting messages from their friends. Religion can play an impact on this, and just our own personal cultural background. So there's that U.S. culture, but then also the culture that we were raised in as individuals. All of that can contribute to that. There are some people who are absolutely raised to talk about this openly and honestly, and I think I need to say that now. I know I've been talking for a little bit here, but we're going to have to talk a little bit in gross stereotypes, because there's always going to be that one person that it doesn't apply to. And if you were that person who was raised in an open, honest place where you can talk about sex and have conversations about it, fantastic. And we'd love to hear from you. But keep in mind that that's not the norm in this country. In this country, we're bringing a sense of shame in because we were told to have shame around the subject, or we're bringing in the sense of, I don't know how to do this because it was always a secret conversation and something not to be discussed openly.
And, talking about the layers, gender expectations of who's the gatekeeper of sex and who gets to take sex, and, all of these layers. So we have a lot of layers to unzip through, so to speak. Don't you think, Dr. Sue?
Yeah. Oh, I love the way you tied that back in. This is why we keep Charlie around. She's really good at bringing us full circle. But yeah, I mean, I would challenge people to think about when you think about having a sexual conversation, or let me change that, a conversation about sex with a friend, with a roommate, with a family member as appropriate, with a doctor, with a partner. Like, think about where your hesitation might be coming from. And then let's think about ways that we can kind of get past that and normalize a lot of this. So that's really one of the goals that we have. And again, I know we keep saying, like, if you have an idea, submit it through the link. There is that link in the description. If there's something you're like, yes, like, why do I do this, or why did I learn this? Throw that in as a suggestion. We're happy to read those and respond.
Absolutely. There is no unzipping this. Again, there's no unzipping this without all of you, and the things that you're going through and that you're trying to unpack for yourself. Or you may just be at the start of this journey, or you may have had an aha moment and you are just looking for that language to reinforce where you are in your journey right now. And we want to engage with that. We're Dr. Sue has the background and has that expertise, but also this is conversational. It's right there in the title, and there is no conversation without you all listening.
So we appreciate you folks tuning into this first episode. Hope you'll listen to the other ones that are coming out. I don't think we've picked a day that we're going to release things, but you'll be able to find the episodes as they roll out. Engage with us, send us ideas, send us questions, and hopefully you'll see your question being highlighted in a future show.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to echo that. I want to thank all of you for joining us on this first episode of Unzipping Taboos, Candid Conversations about sex with Dr. Sue and me, Charlie. We hope this sparks some new thoughts and will open up dialogues worth having, in your circles. And remember, your curiosity is really the key to breaking down these barriers and embracing a healthier understanding of sex health, and relationships. So, if you enjoyed this pilot, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, give us your topic ideas, share it with someone who you feel might need or want to hear this. And again, if you've got a question or a topic you want us to dive into, reach out to us via the link in the episode description. So until next time, keep the conversation going and keep unzipping those taboos. Take care.
Hope you enjoyed that first episode of the new podcast, Unzipping Taboos, Candid Conversations about Sex. Other episodes are currently available on Spotify. Link is in the description. New episodes drop every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Go check them out.